In the distant beginning of his mob involvement in the mid-70s, most things were pretty ordinary in Joe Salerno's blue-collar life. Even its upsets, a marriage that wasn't going well, a plumbing business weakened by debts, should have been manageable. To fend off bankruptcy, Salerno borrowed $10,000 from a friend. He knew the repayment rate, $250 a week covering interest alone, was high. What he didn't know was the money came from a mafia loan shark. To ease the hurt of being refused by a wife who was not Italian American, Salerno turned to his own people. He felt he would not be rejected by them. There was Vincent Falcone, then Alfredo Ferraro, and Philip Leonetti, who had an uncle. How you doing, Joe? I'm doing good. I'm glad you agreed to this interview. Thanks for having me. Of course. With your book, The Plumber, the true story of how one good man helped destroy the entire Philadelphia Mafia coming out. We wanted to get a one-on-one with the man who brought down Scarfo and his crew. So, Joe, how did you even get involved with the Philly mob? I was a plumber in Brigantine, New Jersey. I had my own business. In the early 70s, I worked for different contractors, and I worked alongside Scarfo Inc., which is owned by Nick Scarfo and his nephew, Phil Leonetti. I worked side by side with these people for a few years. It got to be the late 70s, and I got into some financial difficulty. I got a loan. I got a loan from these people. You got the loan from their loan sharking operation. At the time, I didn't know where the money came from. Come on, Joe. Come on, man. You didn't know? I got it from Phil Leonetti. He wouldn't tell me where he got it from at the time. How much did you borrow? 10 grand. Did you pay it off? The loan? I paid some of it off. How much? $250 a week for 13 months in just interest, before the principal part of the loan. I knew it was high. I had no place else to fucking turn, I had a fucking family to support. How is family life? To be honest with you, not so good. My wife and I are separated. I'm sorry to hear that. I read in your book At one point, you were living at the Scarfo compound. Yeah, I was living in a rental, which was owned by Nick Scarfo. I believe his mother, Catherine, was the owner. But I lived in one of the units, the apartments. Joe, how does something like that happen? Like I said, family life was rough. I needed a place to stay. I mentioned it to Philip. He said he'd talk to his uncle. Next thing I know, I'm moving in. This was on Georgia Avenue, right? 28 North Georgia Avenue in Atlantic City. They ran their concrete company, Scarfo Inc., out of this building. On the ground floor. So, you're working with Scarfo and his nephew Philip at their concrete company, Scarfo Inc. You lived on the property, which was also their headquarters. You know, I knew these guys. I'd worked with them from the early 70s. We did a lot of plumbing jobs together in Atlantic City. I felt good working with them. So, naturally, what started to happen was I started to go out with these guys. They never said nothing to me about shooting anybody, or killing anybody, or anything like that. They were working fucking people, man. And I liked them. And we ate the same, we talked exactly the same. If I see them in a restaurant anywhere, if I was out and they were out with a girlfriend, they'd always buy my dinner for me. I guess you can say they saw you sort of like an unofficial member of the family. That's the kind of culture it is. The mafia. On the surface, they're real easy to like, these people. But underneath, it's all fucking wrong. You went so far as to call Nicky Scarfo a devil in your book. A living devil, to be exact. That's putting it mildly. He told me he killed someone. Are you for real? He said he did it with a knife. He twisted it into the guy, and now the guy's dead. Did Scarfo say who this guy was? He didn't, and I didn't ask. He just went on to say anything we say between him and me, we keep it quiet, or he'd make a gesture with his hand. What kind of gesture? He'd make the sign of the gun. He'd point to his mouth as if to say, keep your fucking mouth shut. Or, we do it here. Pointing to his forehead and to his chest. I swear to you, I could hear a heartbeat. Not sure if it was his or mine. I gotta tell you, Joe, this is fucking chilling. I mean, at this point, dude, you gotta send something in kosher with this guy. Or the people buying you baked ziti and vodka sauce at these Italian restaurants. Look, I'm far from naive, alright? I approached Philip one day. I asked him, what does your uncle do? You know, what do you guys do? Says the plumber to the hitman. I'd love to hear this. What did he say? He said, well, I'll show you. So he takes out a magazine, and it was the Philadelphia magazine. He pointed to it. The title of the chapter in the magazine was Contract Killings. In the article, in fact, he said that there was a judge murdered at a certain time. This judge went by the name of Helfand. My uncle and two other people in this article, they were indicted for it. They never went to court. Nobody ever testified against them. This is what we do, Joe. This is what we get away with. And whatever we say between us, you keep it between us. You don't repeat it to anybody, even my uncle. Especially my uncle. The devil, as Salerno calls him, is in purgatory, in solitary confinement and maximum security, 5 floors below ground at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois.
Average inmate who steps out of prison when his sentence is up and then steps right into a waiting limousine. And Nicodemo Scarfo is anything but average, even by organized crime standards. Rita Braver has been investigating a family crime wave. Family ties that bind, family ties that kill.
In the West Texas desert today, a 5'5", 54-year-old ex-boxer finished serving 17 months in federal prison. Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo headed back toward Philadelphia, where he's alleged boss of the mafia. And law enforcement officials are bracing for the next episode in a mob war that has left 18 men dead in the last 4 years.
What's new is the amount of violence, the murders that are occurring.
In a way, what's going on in Philadelphia is what's happening in La Cosa Nostra families all over the country. A change in leadership as younger, more aggressive members try to seize power. The difference is that here, they seem to settle matters more by killing than by consultation. It started in 1980 with Angelo Bruno, the aging and ailing mafia chief.
How's your health these days?
Not so good.
But it was a 12-gauge shotgun and not poor health that killed off 69-year-old Bruno. So the wars began, and of these 3 men who took control after Bruno's death, only Scarfo is left. Philip Chicken Man Testa, blown up by a bomb on his front doorstep. Frank Chicky Narducci, shot 10 times. Experts say what's at stake is control of numbers rackets, loan sharking, and drugs. Scarfo is said to want it all. The battle has narrowed to his side, fighting that of old-timer Harry the Hunchback Riccobini. 2 of Riccobini's relatives found dead just last month. Scarfo appears to be winning. And now that he's out of jail...
As far as the murders, I think it's a matter of when they feel they've accomplished their ends, that particular problem with the other faction will cease.
There will be a close watch on what happens when little Nicky returns to the house he shares with his mom. The attention is not welcome.
Leave us alone. We're not bothering nobody. Leave us alone.
But law enforcement officials are not likely to let that happen. the
A
braver
man
CBS.
reputed to be one of the most powerful mobsters in the East was accused in court today of ordering killing after killing, accused by one of his own crime captains. Anthony Mason is on the case.
Federal investigators say that since 1981, Nicodemo Little Nicky Scarfo has reigned over Philadelphia and Atlantic City as one of the nation's most violent mafia bosses. But the reputed Scarfo crime family may be about to crumble from within. Scarfo and a group of alleged underlings were rounded up on racketeering charges in November, and one member, Thomas Del Giorno, a capo or captain in the crime family, has made a deal with authorities.
He was in a position as capo to intimately know what Mr. Scarfo was doing, why he was doing it.
Today in federal court, Thomas Del Giorno broke the mafia's vow of silence and testified that Nicodemo Scarfo is not only boss of the Philadelphia family, but that he has repeatedly ordered murders to maintain his power. He is the only one who can okay the crime of murder, Del Giorno said, and went on to list 14 hits ordered by his boss. Among them, Frankie Stale Stilitano, found stuffed in a car trunk in 1981. Frankie Flowers Delfonso, shot 10 times in 1985.
It would appear that this individual was eliminated.
Robert Riccobini, murdered in 1983.
Was shot in the back of the head, apparently with a shotgun.
The Riccobini faction had been feuding with Scarfo for years.
He won the war. The Riccobinis ended up not having anybody left on the street to fight their cause.
Even Salvatore Testa, a captain embraced by his boss in mid-1984, was found dumped by the road before the year was out. Del Giorno said he personally arranged the murder on Scarfo's orders.
They saw him kill some of his best friends that he grew up with in the mob, that they realized it was only a matter of time before it was them.
In 1982, Scarfo was called before a U.S. Senate committee.
What do you do for a living?
I invoke my right under the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution and decline to answer the question.
Today, Thomas Del Giorno began giving answers in a legal process that federal authorities say will keep Scarfo in jail for life.
Scarfo's reign ended in the late 1980s when he was convicted and jailed on multiple counts of murder, extortion, and other charges, largely in part due to the damaging testimony of some who worked under him, who then turned into government witnesses. A jury found Scarfo guilty of 9 murders and 4 attempted murders.
When Joe Salerno agreed to testify against Scarfo and his men for the murder of Vincent Falcone, the jury didn't believe him, and they were found not guilty.
After you testified and they were acquitted, did you feel safe in the witness protection program?
I was paranoid. I mean, even though my name was changed, I went to a different location, different social security number, it's still a hard thing to live with.
What about your family? Were they safe?
He put a hit on my father, which is the biggest mistake that he ever made in his career. Yeah, they shot my father. He lived. He survived it.
Joe's father begged him not to testify against Scarfo again, and Joe promised. But torn between his family's safety and doing the right thing, he eventually agreed to testify at the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations trial, better known as RICO. Philip Leonetti and Lawrence Merlino were both convicted for murder and are cooperating with the U.S. government.
Nicky Scarfo presently is incarcerated in Marion, Illinois, which is a maximum security federal penitentiary. He spends 23 to 23 half hours a day in a cell.
Salerno knows precisely why he turned against his buddies from Atlantic City and Philadelphia construction jobs. Look, neither throwing shade or blame here. I just want to know, how did your .32 caliber Colt revolver, how did that gun end up being the gun used in the killing of Vince Falcone? All right. One day I'm at Scarfing, you know? Like I told you, like I said, I lived in the fucking building. I spent a lot of time around these fucking guys. So one day Nick asks me, He asks me if I had any guns. At the time, I had 2 guns. A hunting rifle and a .32 Colt revolver. He asked to borrow them. Let me first say this. At this point in time, if you knew Nick Scarfo, if you really knew him, or even Philip Leonetti at the time, if these motherfuckers asked you to do something, you'd better not fucking refuse. I had 3 kids. They knew that. I had a wife. I had a fucking family. And yeah, people ask me that question all the time. Why did you give them the fucking guns? Didn't you know who these people were? Nick stabbed a guy. He killed this fuck. Scarfo was very unpredictable. I was scared to death of him. I had no fucking choice with this guy. You know, I knew if I didn't give him those guns, if I didn't give them to him, I might have had a fucking problem.